For the church, I thank you for your tithes and offerings, and at this time we'll send children 9 and under if they desire to, or if the parents desire them to, go out for children's church. And we do have nursery care for those that are young, for the nursery, for the infants. Who's got plans for the 4th of July? Got a few hands waving, something like this. Who has no plans? Okay, a few others. I do want to mention this. Wednesday, of course, is the 4th of July. And it's been asked to me, will we have service on Wednesday since it's the 4th of July? And a lot of people have fans. Well, hopefully, maybe you do. You have fans. Especially as hot as it gets, you need some fans. You have plans with your family and with friends. And so here's what I want to present to you. They said, are we going to have services? I would say that is up to you. The way I see it, we get done by around 8 o'clock. It's not dark yet then anyway. But some people maybe say, well, I'm going to have a barbecue and family's going to be over. We're not going to be able to make it. So for those who come on Wednesday, all I need to hear is that, do you want to meet or do you want to take a vacation day? You'll be here. You'll be here. You'll be here. I'll be here. You'll be here. We'll be here then. Okay? We don't need to have a whole crowd. We just need to have a few people that are going to be here. So we will be here Wednesday, July the 4th, beginning at 6:30. Okay, this morning we're in Acts the 27th chapter. How many of you know we're almost done? We began this journey 2 years ago. I said it would take about 2 years, and that's going to take us about 2 years and a month and a half or so. Okay, so pretty close on the guesswork and the estimate as to how long it would take us to go through the book of Acts. And I've shared with you before, there's some chapters in the book of Acts I've been like, oh, I don't know, Lord, I don't know how, I don't know what the message is in here, but boy, this chapter I've been looking forward to for a long time. Okay? How many of you know what happens in this chapter? Anybody read ahead? Anybody ever read the 27th chapter of the book of Acts before? It's a shipwreck. It's a storm. It's you know, and the interesting thing, I was doing some research on this, and I found that historians have said that this account of the journey and the type of storm and everything else that was written, they said this is extremely accurate for this section of the world. And they said what's even more amazing is it's obvious that it was not written by a sailor. They said the way it was written and the way it's described, a sailor would do it completely different. And that just, once again, goes and lends more authenticity to the fact that the Gospels, the Bible, the book of Acts was written by people who were not just inspired by God, but that were there. I mean, Luke is the one who wrote the book of Acts, and because we're going to find he was on this ship at the time. So I've been waiting for chapter 27, because if the book of Acts was a movie, chapter 27 would be like kind of the climax of the movie. You know, we're coming to near the end of the story, and I don't know about you, but my favorite part of the movie is always when the hero comes in and saves the day, right? Right when things get bad and all of a sudden, boom, you know, the hero comes in. And one of the things that I like all kinds of music, and sometimes I drive my family crazy because I like to listen to soundtracks of movies. Now see, for some of you, you're like, oh, you mean like all the songs they put in the movie. No, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about the musical score of the movie. That's what soundtrack meant at one time. Okay? Now it means we fill up the movie with about, 12 or 14 songs that you hear on the radio, and that becomes the soundtrack. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay? I'm talking about the musical score, and because the music would set the scene. There's certain, even today, certain musical scores that if you hear, you know exactly what it's about. When I was growing up, it was, and still is to some degree, the James Bond theme. You know when you hear that, that's James Bond. I think I got this love of soundtracks from my dad, who used to play these things all the time. He used to hear the theme from the Magnificent Seven. Knew exactly what that was whenever I would hear that. And so I was thinking about that And even in the Old West movies, when the cavalry came, they play something, right? You could hear this. And in modern times, it's different soundtracks. We have, the Star Wars soundtrack. And you already got an image in your mind, right? Or maybe it's the Indiana Jones soundtrack. And now, already your mind's going someplace. So I was thinking about what the soundtrack might be, to the 27th chapter of the book of Acts as they're getting ready to enter this storm and this shipwreck. And the first thing that crossed my mind was this soundtrack here. Right? Yeah, that's the first thing that came to my mind. It's like, this is going to be bad. This is going to be really bad, And then all the gale force winds come in. And I guess because I'm a little twisted mind, this is what I thought of. If you don't know what that is, ask me later. But most of you already know. You got an idea what's going on there. The thing is that this is a real life thing, and these things really happen. The waves came, the winds came, the crew is screaming, and the captain was going to be shouting orders, and the tension mounts, and all hope is gone. But then they're rescued. And the thing is, we're only going to get to part of this today. We're not going to get to the rescue part. We're going to be talking mostly about the storm. And I have been accused of having an overactive imagination. But to me, that's what makes these historical books, most of the Old Testament, the Gospels, and the book of Acts, that's what makes it come alive, is to put yourself there and imagine what it must have been like. Because this is not just a dry history book or a religious. I hate it when the Bible is described as a religious book. This is a relationship book. This is a book about man having a relationship with God, and more than that, about how man's supposed to relate to one another. This is real life. These were real people facing real storms and real shipwrecks. And as we read this story, remember this, as far as they knew, now Paul, he's got the inside scoop, as we'll find out next week, but as far as they knew, lives were literally hanging in the balance. But the main reason I like this chapter is because, not just because it's about how God dealt with real people 2,000 years ago, but because it's about how God deals with us here and now today. See, like these men, we've probably all been on stormy seas. Not literally, maybe some of you literally, but in our lives. And if you haven't, you will be. Like these men, your boat has been thrown around. You've been plunged into the eye of the storm. And if it hasn't happened yet, just wait. It's coming. Maybe it's a financial storm. Or maybe it's a family disaster. Maybe it's death or disease or divorce or addiction. But if these things haven't touched your life, they will. Maybe you've lost your job. Maybe you've gotten in debt over your head and you're like going down for the third time. Maybe your tempest has come in the form of depression, which is like a gale force wind that can just rip your sails right to shreds, leave you dead in the water, feeling overwhelmed and underpowered. I don't know what it is. I don't know what storm some of you are weathering, but I know this. Storms have come, and storms will come. And so the lesson of chapter 27 is not primarily that God delivered all these men from the sea. The lesson is that God still delivers His people from the storms today. So let's begin. As we begin in chapter 27, we're going to begin with calm waters and calm seas. And what I want us to notice here is that God works in our lives in stormy times by putting the right people in the right places at just the right time. Verses 1 through 3. When it was decided that we were to sail to Italy, they handed over Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion named Julius of the imperial regiment. Now, then next verse we notice a shift. Okay? He's talking about who in the first verse? Paul. Paul's being handed over. Second verse, all of a sudden, it gets personal. So when we, who's we? Paul and Luke and some others, actually, we're going to find out. So when we had boarded a ship of Duramantium, we put to sea, intending to sail to ports along the coast of the province of Asia. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, was with us. So now we have another person. We have Paul, besides everybody else on the ship, we have Paul and Luke and Aristarchus. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly and allowed him to go to his friends to receive their care. See, the Lord knew the storm was coming, and he put people in Paul's life ahead of time. The first one we see is a man named Julius. And here's the interesting thing. Was Julius probably a believer or a non-believer? He's a non-believer. Think of all the people you know who do not know Jesus as their Savior. They're not in your life by accident. God has brought them there. I believe primarily He's brought them there for you to minister to, but there could be times when they're going to help you out. And like I said, I don't know who Julius was. we don't know much about him, but I do know that God put him there. He was a man who showed kindness to Paul when Paul needed kindness. Remember, where had Paul been spending his days before this? Prison. This is something we have to keep in mind during this whole rest of this book. I know it's only a couple of chapters, but Paul is a prisoner. Okay? He is boarding the ship as a prisoner. He will ride the ship as a prisoner. The ship will shipwreck as a prisoner. Okay? And all this time, keep that in mind. But Julius seems to be showing him kindness. Okay? Not only does he save his life later on in the chapter, but verse 3 tells us that he allowed Paul to go to his friends in Sidon. I mean, can you imagine that? He let Paul go. How did he know Paul was going to come back? We don't even know that he knew Paul before this, before he boarded the ship. And yet he says, we're going to let you go, go visit some of your friends. Paul's character must have spoken very highly. And Julius saw that, and Julius befriended him. And he helped Paul. He maybe thought, well, you're going to Caesar. You're never coming back. You need to see these people. I think the amazing thing is that this is the first time we mention that Paul has any friends in this place called Sidon. Where did these people come from? We have no record of a church there. But I believe God put these people in this place at this time in Paul's life to minister to Paul. It wasn't just an accident. I think about that when I think about this church. How many of you wonder where, this church was here 20 years ago? How many of you were aware of this church 20 years ago? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hands go up. How many people anybody here that used to come to this church 20 years ago? And yet God had put people here so that today, when you came, there would be people here. Can you imagine? We have some people here that are visiting with us. Can you imagine if you showed up and nobody was here?